all the time, but I do want to go back and touch from your early biography a little bit before we get into the stuff about the tax and so forth. You know? Okay, and welcome very much to Conversation. Great personal pleasure. Welcome to the program. A person who I tend to think of as perhaps the most well-informed investigative reporter concerning the international financial system, has worked with the fellow who wrote the book Economic Hitman and so forth, an incredibly erudite scholar, public intellectual, and that's Lucy Komisar. And Lucy, it's so good to see you again. It's really a welcome to welcome you to the program. Always good to talk to Lucy.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
My pleasure. Before we get off into this, you've written this program. I think we have you down as the thing you wrote on, you know, the tax evasion paper that you wrote. You've written so many, and your resume, I'm here to say at the very beginning, is absolutely eye-popping. You've been so busy and such a well-led life. But I wonder maybe we could ground that. The DNA of Lucy Komisar, in a certain sense, seems to me to be formulated with a very hardcore commitment to an elemental system or thinking of justice. And it seems to me you've been like that for a long time. And could we go back to your early beginnings, as it were, born and raised, a little bit educated, and I know you got into the civil rights thing early on, Schwerner and Cheney time and all that sort of thing. And let's ground it there if we could.
It was a bit before, because I was,
okay.
When I got to college, it was just about when the civil rights movement, the sit-in movement was starting.
Yeah.
And I got involved in that.
Early.
Yeah. I went to the meetings where SNCC was organized in Raleigh and was involved in the North. And then I decided I ought to be in the South, because that's really where the important things were happening. So I took a leave from college and spent a year in Jackson, Mississippi.
What year was that?
That was 62 to 63.
62 to 63 is very early, dear.
Yeah.
That was when it was really tough. Stokely was there then
No,
at that time?
he wasn't in Mississippi then.
No, but he was down.
A lot of people came after. I became the editor of the Mississippi Free Press.
God
Bob
bless
Moses.
you.
Bob Moses was there in Mississippi, and other people were in other parts of the South. So if Stokely was, he was at Howard. At the time.
In 62,
he was at school. But, so I don't know whether he took a leave, and I never ran across him in Mississippi. Bob Moses was there, but Stokely was involved in the Northern movement.
Right. Okay, yeah. But what I'm getting at is you were going down into the eyes of the teeth of that deep-seated prejudicial view down there. Dogs, hatred that is very, very deep-seated in the people around it. It was a very gutsy thing, if I may say, for a risky thing to go down into that environment in those early years, and I take my hat off for you for doing that, and then editing a paper on the civil rights side of things. God bless you and all the people involved in that. But
thank you.
Carry on more. That was, you were down there for how long?
For a year.
For a year, right in the midst of that. So you were committed to the idea, and that was based upon a commitment to the idea of justice.
Right.
From an intellectual perspective and from a heartfelt perspective, both.
It was a moral. It is a moral question.
Yeah. Okay. The civil rights issue was.
Yes.
And is, continues on a world scale, and still should be addressed and so forth. And then you got involved. When did you get involved in the investigative journalism on the side of the investment community and the international system of money exchange, money laundering, and that sort of thing? When did you pick up on that idea?
When I was in the middle 80s, I was doing a lot of reporting from developing countries, and I would, beginning in the middle 80s and up to the early 90s, I would go to places like the Philippines. I was there when Marcos was overthrown.
You were?
I went to Haiti.
Right. You mean as it happened?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was in Haiti. I was in Zaire when Mobutu was still in power.
Oh, you got around to some hot spots, didn't you, dear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the oppositions in those places often said to me, the dictator has looted the country, stolen everything, and it's all in Swiss banks.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about Swiss banks, really about the system. Of course, we've all heard about, oh, he's got his money in a Swiss bank account. And if you saw movies, sometimes the crook had his money in Grand Cayman or Switzerland. But I didn't really know the system, so I began to look into this system that they all seem to know about a lot more than I did.
Who knew? The international journalists and stuff?
No, these were the opposition movements.
Oh,
the people
opposition
who were
movement to the leaders of the countries that
the
attacked the country.
oppositionists.
Yeah, okay.
The oppositionists in Zaire. Mobutu, it turned out, had his money in Swiss banks. And Duvalier had his money in Swiss banks,
Papadoc, yeah.
and Marcos had his money. They absolutely were correct.
Yeah.
That's where the money was.
And it isn't only there. There's people here in the United States of America that have money put in places like Swiss banks,
yes.
or the generic thing.
Yes,
of a Swiss bank.
there are now 72 what are called offshore centers. They're not all. Originally, it was offshore because they were little islands off the shore of the major countries that were hiding the money. So there's a whole cluster of islands off the shores of France and England. And then there are the islands in the Caribbean. But that's expanded now. So there are 72. And you have to count some onshore places like Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg. And what these places do, they constitute a parallel financial system, a secret financial system for criminals and tax evaders, which I think are a branch of the criminals. But they move and hide the money of dictators, drug traffickers, fraudsters, and Enron had over 700 shell companies in Grand Cayman. What was it doing with them? Well, it was cooking the books. And they do this with the help of the big banks. A couple of the shell companies that were set up for Enron in Grand Cayman and elsewhere were run by J.P. Morgan Chase and by Citibank. So
Just to mention a couple of smaller clients.
Yes. The big banks know all about it because many of the, I would say the majority of the offshore banks are simply branches of the major international banks. And they use them to help the crooks of the world hide and launder their money.
A lot of questions coming up there. I wonder if we could back up a little bit historically. And when did it get started? I associate Switzerland. Everyone does. Trippingly, it comes off the tongue. A Swiss bank, undisclosed or unnamed accounts and so forth. When did it get started? Was Switzerland the sort of father of them all, or just historically? And when did it come in that we had hidden accounts? When did that start developing in terms of the world financial system?
One of the important dates is in Switzerland. It's in 1932, and there was a raid on an apartment in Paris near the Champs-Élysées. The police came in and confiscated books which had listings of several thousand accounts, and this apartment was where the French clients were coming to meet their Swiss bankers. And there was also some thousands of francs of money there. Well, it turned out that the people whose names were listed in these account books were very famous people, like Peugeot, you've heard that name, Coty of the cosmetics, and others. There were publishers, there were bishops, there were army generals, and this was, they were all hiding their money. This was on the eve of the war with Germany.
Help me out here. If they were hiding their money in a numbered account or something, how did we come to know their names? Because it was a secret thing that wasn't supposed to be known, or outside
it wasn't secret then.
Things sometimes are messy as something new developing. They get it refined.
But this is how it started. There were accounts that were in Switzerland. They weren't open to the, they would think of it as the snooping of the French law enforcement. That's where they were having this, what they thought was a surreptitious meeting in an apartment, and all the names were written in the books. After this, a law was passed in Switzerland saying that never again could they have in their records openly, publicly, the names of the clients.
Oh, that's where they got the idea of the numbered account,
That's what started it.
Because and it was in the early 30s.
That was in 1932. The law was passed in 1934.
Okay, right.
And that's where it started. And then other people realized, besides the tax evaders who were using these accounts, and not just the French, of course, the Americans were there as well. It began to be used by Meyer Lansky. Meyer Lansky set up a Swiss bank to launder his gambling.
Las Vegas,
his money. And other crooks later in the 60s, the drug traffickers used it.
Okay, we're getting ahead a little bit if I can. I'm trying to get a historical bearing because we had a banking industry, now the banking industry and the banking process in terms of the organization of our world society and so forth has a legitimate role to play. There is a legitimate role for the business and the banking and the financing and so forth. But what you're talking about are things, are you talking about things that grew out of a an impetus on the part of the banking things to create a creative new way of doing things, you know, things change or are altered? Or was it known that these things they were doing was to be a cover for what were illicit activities on the part of people within the financial community? Or did it grow out of a legitimate attempt to just refine the banking system, make it more efficient, maybe move with the times, we're moving global and that sort of thing? What did you think?
It's not more efficient to have numbered bank accounts.
Well, okay, what was the rationale for the numbered bank account by the people who got it started?
They would get more clients if they could guarantee secrecy because their clients were going to be crooks.
Well, no, wait a minute. Would there be if I may, I'm trying to be a devil's advocate in a way. Would there be, if you have a secret account that nobody can get at, there would be advantages to somebody who's doing something legitimate. So you're servicing a legitimate need of a business person who wants to have nobody have access to who it is. It's a secret account, not for some illegitimate reason, but for some legitimate reason that the banks were catering to.
There's no legitimate reason. You know, having your name on an account does not mean I can go into the bank and say, I'd like to see Harold's bank account.
Yeah, they have unpublished phone numbers. Some people like. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
but okay, I'm trying to make a case for the bankers.
But there is no case because what it does is it hides this from law enforcement, from the people who have the right to know. Law enforcement that goes in with a court order because they think that this guy is a drug trafficker, and and the money seems to have gone from one of his cohorts or colleagues someplace, and they want to see what's in the account. It's not to hide. A business person has no reason to have a secret account. His competitor or her competitor cannot go in and see the account. It's only to hide it from law enforcement.
Well, okay, you're saying that. I'm trying to make another case. Like in business, people are going, one of the things there's a great trade in terms of intelligence is corporate to corporate. The corporate person from corporate A wants to get the secrets of corporate B, and there's a lot of that kind of thing going on in competition between the big players, is there not?
That's true. But
okay, now that could be something along the financial line. They could be trying to service that to give them a certain advantage, and that's what they're all looking for.
Well, but that's not the case because if they're going to buy the information from the bank has it. The bank will know who the secret account belongs to. So they can, the bad guys that want to get information they shouldn't get, they will still get it. It's only the law enforcement, because the other thing that happened was they made it a crime in Switzerland for bankers or people working in banks, not just the top guys, to provide information to anyone. It is totally illegal. You could go to jail if some judge says, or some prosecutor or investigator wants to get the information and has
out of a numbered account, you mean?
Yeah, you can go to jail.
In Switzerland.
That's right.
Yeah, you can
so that was the problem. There's no possible legitimate reason because the accounts are private.
Well,
secrecy doesn't mean not private. It only means that nobody, if you're a drug trafficker from the Medellin cartel, you can be sure. And in fact, one of the things that's interesting is whenever a drug trafficker, a big-time drug trafficker is killed, the bankers in places like Switzerland and Luxembourg and Liechtenstein are very happy because nobody is going to be able to collect that money. And they will have millions that will stay in the bank because nobody's name is on the money. It's just a number, and they're sure not going to tell anybody.
Is that a true fact?
Yes.
Is that a true fact? Really? That's amazing. I mean, so what is the rationale? I don't suppose the rationale given in 1932 or whenever that started in Switzerland was, well, we're going to be able to hide money for all the crooks of the world, to be able to hide their money, and that's why we're trying to make a front for the drug dealers. And they weren't giving that as a rationale.
No, maybe there weren't drug deals around in 1930s.
There probably were, but
anyway. They were doing it to hide the tax cheats money.
Oh, all right, but they didn't say in their things,
we
have secret accounts, you can come here and you can hide your tax.
Everybody knew it.
They knew it, but they wouldn't give that as a rationale for offering this service. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I don't think that matters. Everybody knew it. You don't have to spell it out.
Same thing today in a certain sense, because everybody knows it. You said it comes trippingly off the tongue. Oh, he's got his money hidden in a Chase account down the Cayman Islands, Isle of Man or something like that, and everybody sort of just accepts it. Oh, yeah, that's the way it is. And yet that's a very huge part of the world financial situation that has huge consequences in terms of justice and also efficiency in terms of an overworking system, does it not?
Absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
And you're following that very carefully.
Yes, because this is one reason why more money has to be paid in taxes by people at the bottom, by the middle class, people who ache because of property taxes, more true for people that own houses
Yeah.
than for renters in New York, but they have to pay more because a lot of people are paying less because
Yeah.
they're hiding their money.
And there are a lot of people are hiding their money and so forth in these tax shelters. That's a term that's sometimes given to Cayman Islands and so forth, in order to avoid paying taxes to some legitimate state authority somewhere.
That's right.
And that's what it's about.
That's what
and
it's
so
about.
they understand it. And the people that represent the chief officers of these banks and so forth know this is what's going on, and they go along with it or something.
Of course.
It's a huge indictment in a certain sense, if one stops to think of the overall financial system by which the planet operates, is it not?
You can look at the advertisements of some of these big banks, particularly for their private banks. Private banks are set up for people who are going to put in at least $5 million. It's not for us, but they...
You're not going to put in $5 million?
I'm
just kidding,
Not
Lucy.
this year.
Not this year, okay.
So they look at the advertisements
Yeah.
and read between the lines. You don't have to read very far, but it's all about protecting. It's about protecting your money from anybody else that might want to take a look at it. That's what it really says, and protecting it from taxes, guarding your finances.
Well, isn't that what a good accountant would do also? To the limits of the law, the accountant would do a creative trick in order to get you so you don't have to pay more than you...
Then it's not a trick. But these people are putting their money there so that they don't pay taxes. And the banks make twice as much money from the offshore private banks as they do from their other business.
You mean on a percentage terms or in gross terms? Or do we know?
Well, I've been told by somebody who has talked to bankers about this, that the bankers told this colleague of mine, we make twice as much money on the money that we take in these places than we do onshore.
This is an anecdotal.
Yeah, but I have another, let me give you another.
Yeah, because if anybody's got the thing, and if I may, Lucy, I've read your stuff, a lot of your stuff, you really do get your sources triple sourced and so you really are serious. You're real serious journalism. You don't throw rumors around.
No, I wouldn't do that.
No, you do not. I'm saying that to the audience. You understand she's a real serious person.
One of the stories, which is fascinating, and it was actually on television in Argentina, a good journalist got an actor to pretend to be a businessman in Buenos Aires. He went to a Citibank, but he had a hidden camera. Don't know quite how he did. He had a hidden camera. He told the Citibanker that his wife had just sold a business and they wanted, how was he going to handle the money? He was saying it in code, and the banker said, oh, you want to move the money so you don't have to pay so much in taxes. He didn't want to have it come that the guy was asking for this. He wanted the banker to suggest it. And the banker said, I can do that for you. You know how he was going to do it? Well, there wasn't any money really, but what he said was, we're going to, I know somebody who can wire the money, have the people that are going to buy the business send it to this account, and we will wire the money to this Citibank branch in New York.
Citibank.
Yes.
Citigroup.
That's right. And in New York, it will be put under your name as a foreigner. However, Citibank does not report to Argentina that it has an account for Senor so-and-so.
Do they have an obligation to do so under
under our law?
There's no law. There's no federal, no international law that can force that.
There's no American law.
It's the pirate of the open seas.
Yeah, but also there is whether it's law or whether it was, I think may have been a legal judgment that the U.S. does not have to and should not help other countries collect their taxes. That is another way of saying
say it again.
the U.S. should not be helping other countries collect their taxes.
Help the citizens from the other countries that are evading taxes. We don't help them.
We don't help Argentina collect their taxes.
And they won't help them. They won't help catch the people who are evading American taxes.
No, it doesn't.
Quid pro quo.
But they don't put. Americans don't put their money in Argentina. They put it in Grand Cayman, and it's the same deal. They don't. But the point is, Citibank and New York, that's not supposed to be a tax haven. So this guy said, don't worry, I do this, the banker, I do this for people all the time because the taxes are too high.
Guy got it on tape?
And yes, he got it on tape.
Are those words that are actionable?
Well,
as the lawyers say?
who would sue who?
I don't know. That's interesting too. That's another issue. What is the venue where someone could go in an
They
international
didn't
court?
sue.
There are no
There's no venue. What happened is the banker got fired, although he was given some pocket change. They shut down the private.
Because he reported. The reporter.
No, the banker was the one who was saying this. And
yeah, but he was saying it to the actor. Was he a method actor?
And it was on I don't know.
and
it was on television.
It was on Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it.
It was on television.
Sorry. Yeah, okay.
It was also then written in a book.
Yeah.
And I have a full transcript on my website.
Good for you.
And
yeah, your website's really rich,
Thank
and it's getting better all the time, dear. It's really good. Yeah.
They shut down the private bank, which was going to be used for this transaction, and so Buenos Aires moved all its customers, I think, to Chile, to Uruguay. The banker, was also removed, but that's it. And you know that it goes on all the time. And here's Citibank in New York saying, basically, being willing to set up accounts to help. Argentina, of course, was in great financial difficulty for many years.
It was terrible. They imploded. The whole economy imploded.
It was just about then. It was around 2000 or 2002.
Right, that's when it imploded.
They were in a terrible situation.
Yeah.
And they were
having met all International Monetary Fund requirements for structural adjustment, might say, yeah.
And here they were having their taxes sucked out with the help of Citibank in New York.
Okay, did any repercussions come back to Citigroup?
No.
Or to Mr.
No.
Weil or anything like that?
No.
Is there any way that it could? Is there an international agency that could have some Interpol or something? Or
it's not
is it
illegal. It's not illegal.
It's not illegal.
And I'm the only journalist that wrote about it. The American press didn't write about it.
What about the fellow who wrote The Economic Hitman and that? Is he covering these kind of things, or is that another aspect of the overall sordid story?
No, I don't think he's covering this.
His name again is I forget, but
John.
What? No, anyway, yeah, I'm sorry. It escapes me at the minute. A really best-selling book. Yeah.
But except for the report in Argentina, they, of course, it was on television, but the media in the U.S. should have reported on this because it was an American bank.
Had huge implications for the system, yeah.
Yes, and they don't touch it because this goes on all over the world.
And there's also coordination and cooperation between the players that are playing the same game. A lot of wink-wink going on and that kind of stuff?
I suspect so.
Yeah,
The wink-wink is let's keep the system going and let's not do anything to change the system.
And a lot of people being able to benefit to that through that kind of a system like that. That's really incredible. It got started in Switzerland, and now it's all over the place. You say there's 70-some. The Isle of Man's a big place now.
That's
right. Jersey Islands. And, and what happens if Swiss all of a sudden, is there any way to put pressure upon the people who are instigating this kind of a thing as it sounds almost like flim-flam.
It is.
Yeah, okay.
You know, Switzerland has a third of the world's deposits from the very wealthy, one-third.
Is that true? Yeah. That's because they have these numbered accounts.
Well, it's not numbered anymore, but they're still secret.
They're secret.
They're still secret.
And it's against the law for those to divulge those numbers. There's no way they can get that information out of
The only
those
way
people?
is if you become remember the Jewish accounts? They were numbered accounts.
Right.
Switzerland did not want to provide any information. Then some Americans, particularly people who were controllers of states and cities in the U.S. and also the heads of pension funds threatened Switzerland that they would lean on them. They would take money out of Swiss institutions, including Swiss banks.
So that had one interest against another.
Yes. Suddenly Switzerland was able to find the money of the Jewish accounts, but it was it was the same system. And it's similar to what I
like
said.
A mafia kind of.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, right.
It's what I said about, and you asked about the drug traffickers. I said when they died, people were very happy.
Yes.
Well, think how happy they were when Jews who had put their money in the Swiss banks.
Are you talking pre-Holocaust in there?
Well, they put their money pre-Holocaust and then they died and their relatives or those who had survived wanted to get the money back and the Swiss bankers just wanted to keep it.
Right. They wanted to keep it for themselves.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Well, I should think there'd be an economic interest on the part of the people who put the money in to make sure that kind of thing is not going to happen somehow.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, but the system is geared to keep that secrecy. It's very important
There's
for them
a way,
to keep that.
Yeah, but there's a solution.
Okay.
Robert Morgenthau,
Morgenthau,
the district attorney of New York,
right.
he says and other people who know how the system works, all you have to do is for the American banking system and the G7, all of the major banks in the G7, to say, our banks will not accept wire transfers from any offshore jurisdictions that do not practice transparency, that do not cooperate with law enforcement.
But wouldn't that find the face of some very, 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 if I may, a couple more very, very big interests that are running the overall system?
That's right.
Okay.
Look at Robert Rubin, who's the eminence grise that was big guy in the Clinton administration. He was Treasury Secretary.
Yeah, he might be touted for that if they come into the office again.
Therefore, those people want to keep the system. But all you'd have, if you could not move money from an account in Grand Cayman or Switzerland to an account in New York, you would not put your money in Grand Cayman. And of course, they would have to say all the intermediary places also, we will not accept any transfers that in any way use the offshore system, that originate or go pass through the, and then it would be over. It would be over in a heartbeat.
Yeah, it would be over in a heartbeat, and then it would be adjusted. What would be the repercussions of such a huge transformation if that were able to be achieved? You would need political support for that from the highest levels of organized society.
Yes, you need a movement.
We don't seem to have that.
We don't have it yet.
We have a what? Did you?
We don't have that yet.
Don't have what you would need.
We don't. We need a movement.
A movement. Okay.
We need a movement. Here we go back to the 60s. We need a movement. Now you have a few people among the candidates, for example, Edwards and Obama, have both said that they would combat the offshore system. I'm waiting for Hillary to say something.
Have they spelled it out in any detail? What it would mean when you're coming up against Citigroup and that? Citigroup's been. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Obama, who is in the Senate, is a co-sponsor of the Stop Tax Haven Abuse Act, which was...
Is that right?
And that
Spell it out a little. That's really interesting.
Stop Tax Haven Abuse.
Yeah, but it's Obama who's done that.
Well, it's Levin. It's Senator Carl Levin, who's the most important person in the Senate on this issue.
Is that true? Okay.
The most important.
Thank you.
Who has been fighting on this for a dozen years, and Obama signed on to this bill.
Anybody else from the Democratic candidate list?
No, not a one. And of course, Edwards is no longer in the Senate, so he can't sign it.
No.
But he has said that he would take strong action against the offshore system. And I know that Kucinich also is working on...
He'd be there for sure.
He is working on legislation and on policy that's also would target the tax...
Let me ask you a couple things.
Hillary, where's Hillary?
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, I don't know like that, but it's interesting. Obama's done that. That's really on this issue. There's other issues too that do it. You know, we're coming up to Iowa, aren't we? You know, and that kind of thing. It'd be interesting to see. But that would be at the highest level. And what would happen if you have something that would be that is so ingrained in the system, and that system is pretty sophisticated now, and those people are pretty smart. They're really clever at being able to find an edge in everything. And a lot of people have gained a certain niche and an advantage, and it's called power. And it's called it's like in a certain sense testing the limits of the system that's in place, almost like in a paradigm sense, in order to be able to have the wherewithal in order to do that. It's the movement, like you say.
Yes, it is. We see, for example...
tied into a lot of other parts of a qualitative transformation that this would be one aspect of, right?
Well, let me just, as an example, take the issue which is in the press now about taxing people who make the equity fund managers who really are running a scam, and they're paying 15% taxes because they label their income as something else, and people like Schumer are on their side, and they should be paying the same percentage of taxes as other people. But there are people now that are speaking out against this. But we don't have a movement of people speaking out what is actually a much, much bigger scam, and that's the whole offshore system.
Right.
That's why I got involved with the Tax Justice Network.
Yeah, you've been at it for a long... Yeah, Tax Justice Network at Davos you were last year.
That's right.
You gave the award,
2 years ago. We gave a counter award to Citibank for promoting tax evasion.
Was it Citibank or Citigroup?
Citigroup. Well, Citigroup is the owner of Citibank. We gave it to them for...
Mr. Prince just had to leave.
Yes.
Isn't it interesting? Things catching up, maybe.
Yeah, but it's not us. It's,
okay.
it's because
it's
there are other problems.
Yes, right.
But
But you may be on the leading edge. You may be an impetus towards something that's maybe
it hasn't picked up yet. And the problem is all the people out there understand some of this, understand about the equity fund managers, that they should not pay just 15% instead of 35%.
Yeah.
But people don't yet understand this. So we started the Tax Justice Network. It came out of the World Social Forum in Porto Alegre, Brazil in 2003.
Okay,
and I went there, and a lot of, there were people from Europe there, and we got together and started the Tax Justice Network. So now there are groups in England and France and Italy and Germany and Switzerland and several of the Scandinavian countries as well. And we started one in the U.S. But we need money, and we need people, and we need staff, and we need people to help us do research and to do all kinds of work. So people can look for that on the internet. Just put Tax Justice -USA and in Google, and it'll come up.
Now
it's also on my website. If you look at the top right side, there's a link to the Tax Justice Network. But we need to build a movement the same way we built a movement in the 60s.
That was on civil rights.
On civil rights, then.
No. This would be part of a larger movement, in a sense.
Although it does affect poor people.
Of course it does. All
and
of
the civil rights movement was largely focused not just on race, but also on poverty. And this affects poor people because they pay more. We have to pay sales taxes because rich people don't pay their income taxes.
That's right. That's
people
true.
don't get services. We don't have health care for millions of people because rich people cheat on their taxes and corporations cheat on their taxes. But most people don't make the connection that
it gets a little esoteric and a little hard to read, like an accountant's accounts are pretty hard to read.
You have to understand that to spend money, you have to get money. And people know about the spending, but they don't yet understand enough about the getting, and they don't understand how we're being scammed.
I know we got a little piece of clip we're going to show down the line, but with Mr. Stiglitz, who's a major voice for justice. It's a larger issue of justice and that sort of thing. But what is it? We're trying to deal with a situation that's emerged out of history and so forth, where these things have all come into place. And you do have a banking industry, you do have a globalizing environment, you do have an internet, you do have these major interests and the formulation of capital and capital accumulation and transaction. And those things have to have a capability to move quickly and all that sort of thing. We have funds transfer and all kinds of things and efficiencies. So there is a legitimate place for all these new systems by which they can be done. And what I'm saying is they're going to be arguing. Are they going to be arguing for that? Those people that are involved in that, when something comes up, do they say, well, we were just doing something that is a creative use of our clever ability to get a quarter-point edge over our competitor or something?
Well, they usually say that somehow they really think it's legal, but it's really not legal, and they end up being told it's not legal. Now, Stiglitz is a very good person on this because he brings it into the global system. And
these things have to be seen globally, don't they?
Well, they are, because we have the banking system is global. The economic system is now global. The problem with this...
Everything is global in a way, except labor.
That's right.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But having global is no reason for having secrecy and non-transparency. The non-transparency is what gets us into trouble. The non-transparency of what was really going on in all those subprime structures and invented instruments, very much like what happened with Enron. They were all these instruments. Now they're called sieves, which is a very funny name. The money just went into the sieve. And they're all structured finance instruments. And that's what Enron did. And now we see that is what's happening with the subprime. And they do it in offshore places where nobody can see what's going on. It doesn't have to be non-transparent. And to move money quickly, you don't have to go through Grand Cayman and Switzerland. You can go directly from New York to London or Paris, where the money ends up. These places are way stations. They actually
but they've got these big entities involved in that network.
That's right.
Citicorp.
That's right. They're making a lot of money.
And they can make more money on these transactions.
It's our money.
So they're going to want to try and deal with that in a way if they can, because again, they're very competitive and they're very, that kind of way. It's a very. So how are we going to deal with that in terms of a I guess it's going to call for a very large movement, as you said, waking up to something new that makes these conditions that are in place, and they're firmly in place, and huge interest involved. Greg Palast says the Congress, it's the best Congress money can buy. Money and corporations have great power. Corporations, corporate interests benefit by some of these things also.
Well, of course, they don't pay taxes.
Yeah, they avoid,
They
so you got the big players,
taxes.
you got the foxes doing very, very well in that hen house, right?
That's right.
And so that represents the people that have all the so-called, what they call power in the system, and they work together, and they're winking their eye, and they see it and everything. So to challenge that fundamentally would take something coming from the people, I guess, if they could become informed, and you're one of the people that are doing your level best and the best job of reporting those kind of things. And I take my hat off to you for doing it, and all the people that are trying to, pursue that, right? In the media and so forth. We'll be in the media, but we don't have any international institutions, for one thing. International courts. We don't have it like we have a federal system in the United States that the states are operating, but the countries, the sovereignty of the countries, we don't have an international system for enforcing or for laying down the law or systems, and you know what I'm saying?
There are two major accounting organizations or bodies, but they're private. They're not owned. They're not run by the government. There's one called FASB. It's an international. It's for accounting standards, and one called IASB.
Yeah.
International Accounting Standards Board. That's in Europe, and they are working now on accounting standards. But one of the problems, what they allow should not be allowed. For example, they allow companies to put together their accounts from various countries. So say you had a company that was involved in 5 or 6 African countries, and they could put their accounts all together. So no one country in Africa that's trying to figure out what does this company owe to us, they can't figure it out because the accounting board allows them to jumble up the accounts. This should not be done. This is to help companies cheat on taxes.
Why does the accounting system allow that?
Because it's run by the people in power.
That's the trouble. It comes back
run
to that
by
in
the
a
people.
sense.
It's the big five. Why did Arthur Andersen help Enron cook the books?
They went under.
They went
Arthur
under only
Andersen,
because Enron went under, and then after a while, and then people saw that they were cooking the books. Citibank was helping them cook the books, but Citibank didn't go under because people in government sometimes think that these big behemoths are too big to fail.
Well, there is that. Chrysler, remember Chrysler? Chrysler was too big to fail. They couldn't let it fail.
So,
that kind of
I think they ought to break down these accounting firms into smaller firms so that they're not too big to fail. That's what happened when KPMG, of course, there's a lawsuit.
Or in the media, perhaps, also, if I may.
Of course. There's a criminal case against people in KPMG, and it's been focusing now on just individuals that were involved in setting up what were illegal tax shelters. But at a certain point, it looked like the government, Justice Department, might be going after the company itself. And they were visited by lawyers for the company. Justice Department was visited, and they were told, if you go after our company, there will only be 3 worldwide accounting companies.
They have a couple big guys, big, tall, 8-feet guys with baseball bats standing behind them as they made the point.
And this will not be good for the world to only have 3 left. So it's blackmail.
Yeah, it's blackmail. Right. Just it's mafia sounding, isn't it? It's like the bosses getting together, that kind of thing. And that's a problem. Well, listen, we've been mentioning Mr. Stiglitz, right? And Mr. Stiglitz is a legitimate voice, and you got a little piece of tape you put together.
Yeah, I organized a meeting where he spoke. It was a meeting for the Tax Justice Network.
Good.
It was held at Columbia, and he spoke there, and I took out perhaps 6 of the most interesting minutes of his talk, which was about a half-hour talk. He's very good in making the connection between the tax evasion and what is going on globally.
You set it up, I think, in the tease also, but why don't you hear quickly, too, because he was the head of the World Bank. His credentials are
He was the chief economist of the World Bank, and he was the head of Clinton's Council on Economic Advisors.
He was. That's a very responsible thing, and the Democrats may be coming back and that sort of thing. So he's a voice like that. So why don't we in the room, I guess it runs runs about 5-6 minutes,
Yes.
something like that. And it's a little bit, and the trouble is that some of these issues that are so important may not have all the glitz of Britney Spears or something. You know, it's hard for people to focus on. But is Mr. Stiglitz a serious scholar? And why don't we set that up and run that now? I guess it runs 5 or 6 minutes. And
Yeah.
we're talking with Lucy Komisar. Run the tape now then, please, if you would. Here we go.
I'm Lucy Komisar. I'm a journalist and co-chair of the Tax Justice Network USA, the American branch of a new international coalition founded to oppose massive tax evasion by corporations and the very rich. Hear what Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel laureate, said about this subject at a meeting in New York organized by TJN USA and his Initiative for Policy Dialogue. Professor Stiglitz is a former chief economist of the World Bank and former head of the U.S. Council of Economic Advisors under President Clinton. He now teaches at Columbia University.
If you believe, as I believe, the important role for government, if you have government, you have to be able to raise taxes. One of the reasons for lack of confidence in our tax system is a widespread perception that rich people avoid paying taxes. And one of the ways they avoid paying taxes is by keeping money in these tax shelters. Not only do they, in these tax havens. And you know, it was so clear that the reason $500 billion is in the Cayman Islands is not because the Cayman Islands provides a better climate for banking than New York City. You know, it's not like, you know, you might be able to grow better sugarcane in the Cayman Islands, but not, why is it better for banks? And there's clearly only one reason why banking goes on in the Cayman Islands is because it is a place where people can avoid taxes, regulations of all kinds. And so the question is, why is it that we pass regulations to stop certain behavior, but we clearly condone, or allow for these tax savings to continue? I've been very concerned for a very long time about these secret bank account havens, and you know, argued that they're bad for the developing countries, bad for, you know, money laundering, drugs, corruption. They're bad in every dimension. And I occasionally, for reasons I don't fully understand, get invited to give talks in these places. I was at one of these tax secret havens, banks, and I gave my lecture, and afterwards a couple of the bankers came up to me a little bit sheepish and said, you know, we're not as bad as you seem to think we are. We don't do bank secrecy for corruption, drugs, all these nefarious things that you've accused us of. We only do tax evasion. There was an initiative at the OECD to do something about bank secrecy. And that led to drawing up of a convention to reduce bank secrecy, which the Bush administration vetoed in August of 2001. In a way, the timing could not have been worse, because we all know what happened in September of 2001, and we discovered then that secret bank accounts are used not only for drugs, terrorism, not only for drugs, money laundering, tax evasion, but also for terrorists. And since then, the Bush administration has shown fairly convincingly that when we want to, we can stop bank secrecy. But we've chosen only to do it for terrorism and for North Korea. Bank secrecy has continued. We now know, what I felt at the time, it's not difficult to stop bank secrecy, to stop these secret bank accounts. All that the United States would have to say is that no American bank can do business with any bank that operates in a jurisdiction that doesn't subscribe to these basic transparency codes. these basic codes of conduct that we say are the minimal codes of conduct for appropriate banking behavior. If they can't deal with the United States and the other G7 countries, they won't be able to function as banks. And their viability will be greatly undermined. And so it's clear to me that we could shut down this bank secrecy if we wanted. So the only question, I mean, why don't we want to? Well, I say we probably know why we don't. The real question is how to change the policy, at least the way my perspective is, how do we change how do we do something about this problem, which I think costs all of our society in so many ways so much and benefits so few. And I think this is one of the areas where civil society, some kind of activism, will be necessary if we are going to attack this issue.
That activism is being organized by the Tax Justice Network USA, working to end tax evasion by the big corporations and the very rich. Look at the website, taxjustice-usa.org, to find out how you can get involved.
Boy, that's really interesting. That was well done. He said we can do that. A couple things come up. He said they're going to do it for terrorism. That is a segue into the fact that I know you've written on the fact that a good deal of the financing of Mr. Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden has been utilizing these systems, and that's gotten the attention of some. And he said it could be done. He said we all know that it's there and that, but do we know it well enough? And it would take, again, a big movement in order to get some juice behind the idea of this qualitative fundamental change.
We know it very well. In the case, for example, of Osama bin Laden, after 9/11, the Americans immediately knew where to go. They went to the Banca del Gottardo, which is a Swiss bank in Lugano. It was a bank that was the Swiss subsidiary of the Banco Ambrosiano. Remember the Vatican Bank that was run by Roberto Calvi, who it collapsed and he was found hanging from Blackfriars Bridge in London. Well, the Banco del Gottardo is a money laundering bank. It had the accounts of Yeltsin and his cronies, and it also had the shell bank called Altaqua. A shell means it's not a real bank. It's not bricks and mortar. You can't walk into it and get an account
Nothing
there.
but a brass plaque sometimes.
Yes, it's just paper. And so that, and I was able to get the documents showing who the owners were of this Altaqua bank, and it included some of the bin Ladens. And the American, and it had a subsidiary, again, paper, in Nassau, the Bahamas. And so the Americans immediately went and shut down Altaqua Bank. They knew where to go in the Bahamas and in Switzerland.
But they don't want to extend this out into the things that involve Citigroup and that kind of thing, or the larger issues in terms of the organization of the international system.
No, because they're against Osama, but Citigroup is laundering and hiding the money for their friends.
Yes, but it's interesting that Mr. Stigler picks it up and that Mr. Bush, of all things, would do it because they can say it's terrorist, so that gives them something they can target, and it opens up the possibility the larger issue of we can make these accountability standards real.
The way it was used by...
And we could.
Of course we could. When the oil for food scandal broke more recently, I thought I was a bit amused because the Americans, again, when I say Americans, I meant people in the government, the investigators, knew that this was going on in the 1980s. And I wrote about this. And I have the documents about this. Saddam was using offshore banks and shell companies to get arms, to get kickbacks from arms purchases made to companies in France, in Germany, in Brazil. And they were going through accounts that were set up in places like Switzerland and Panama. And the Americans, of course, knew about this. Partly I know that because I have a copy of a report that Kroll did, which was made available, Mr. Kroll told me, to the Treasury Department, which talked about some of this. So the American officialdom and investigators knew exactly what was going on, but of course then Saddam was a friend of the U.S., had his picture taken with Rumsfeld, but kickbacks and money was moving around the Western offshore banks, and so Saddam, of course, knew how to do this to get the kickbacks in the oil for food. These things were not stopped when they were going on.
But he makes the case for the fact, because if the terrorists are part of that, Mr. Bush makes a case for that we can make transparency, but it seems to stop at the terrorist door and not go on to the terrorists that are on Wall Street and so forth, to use an overworked term, or a loaded term.
One of the problems is some of the same money managers, the crooks who move the money, they have many clients. And so one of my favorite...
Very deep-pocketed clients,
a company called Valmet in the Isle of Man was partly owned by Riggs Bank. Riggs Bank was moving the money for Pinochet and had a lot of clients. They had most of the embassies of Washington were Riggs Bank clients. Valmet also handled money moving and tax cheating for Khodorkovsky and Yukos. The Russian oil, the Russian oil company.
All the oligarchs,
And so here's a company that, and Valmet also handled money for a guy who was tried in New Jersey for penny ante fraud, and he had to come and testify, but he was told that he didn't have to testify about any of his other clients. So the Justice Department just wanted to put this somewhat small-time crook in jail, Robert Brennan, but didn't care about the rest of what this guy knew. The guy's name is Peter Bond, and he was running Valmet in the Isle of Man. The Americans know about the system. They know about it very well. The CIA knows about it very well. They follow these things, but they don't do anything except in very extreme cases, and those were the cases we're talking about. Just after 9/11, of course, they went after the Osama bin Laden bank. Stiglitz refers to North Korea. But those cases the U.S. will go after, will not go after the system at all.
That's what I was going to get at in a sense. They won't get at the system because everybody's wrapped up in that system. And the thing is, the larger thing, and you were saying the only way we're going to deal with this sort of thing is that we're going to come at it from a systems perspective, a comprehensive perspective. And it's very, very inconvenient when you have a major paradigm shift, as we may be going through now in the world and so forth, and all of the institutions that have been formulated within a certain context are being changed by the spirit or the zeitgeist or the spirit of the age or the ontology, or a major transformation that's taking place. It's very inconvenient for those who have an investment in the old order because they've got things to amortize and the use of that and so forth. So what you're talking about is a very large change in order to bring a system which serves not only the few, and has always served only the few, to one that can really irrigate the whole social fabric of the society, bring justice, which you're committed to, and also efficiencies for the whole of the system into being that are now the promise of the time in which we look, and the promise and the requirement of the future. That transformation is beyond, it seems, the political process, because they're all wrapped up in trying to make good systems that are outdated. And that's the major problem that confronts us. Maybe it'll come out of the media or the civil society, the movement.
I think it has to come out of the civil society. The media has not been very good in reporting on this.
They're all bought and paid for by the same people that buy the banks, are they not? And they're getting more and more limited.
Yeah, at the top, yes, and at the bottom, maybe there's laziness. And when the investigative report is generally focused on very local things and not on international things.
Systems things are what should be focused on.
But civil society has to get involved, and that hasn't happened yet. That's what the Tax Justice Network is trying to do.
Yeah,
but
bless you, yeah.
But civil society and even major civil society organizations don't really yet seem to understand how central question is to doing anything.
It's always been, since Cro-Magnon caves, follow the money, I believe, has been a dictum that has always been there and so forth. It has, and it's still applicable in terms of showing the inappropriateness. But the larger issue of how are we going to organize things in a major new way, and why are we going to have justice now when we haven't, or why are we going to have systems efficiency? Those kind of arguments might appeal to the people that are in positions of power, maybe politically. Obama, it's interesting you said he did that. Something that really bespeaks qualitative trains might be in the wind. And if it is in the wind, I think it's going to be brought there by people like Lucy Komisar and the people that are putting these kind of things together, a critique of the system. Now it will be a question of what the alternative is, how are we going to deal with that transformation, and that might be coming out of some of the media centers like we're trying here in public access. It might be able to be merging out of a people's network like public access. Understand you're going to get involved over here.
Well, I think it's very...
No, you can get involved in programming.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Welcome aboard,
yes.
Lucy Komisar.
Yes.
Yeah, where the faculty is growing, yes, for public access. Yeah, we only got about a minute left. So, yeah, welcome. You're thinking of doing some programming along these.
Yeah,
you have done, yeah.
I did one on, which was an interview with John Moscow, who worked for Morgenthau and did the BCCI investigation. And he talked about how the first Bush Justice Department would not cooperate, and I think they just try to sit on the investigation because it showed up a lot of things they didn't want made available. How the CIA, for example, was using BCCI, that very dirty bank.
Yes,
but, so
remember
I've done,
well, yeah.
I did that.
Silverado or something, yeah.
Well, that was a Neil Bush bank
yeah,
I think in Colorado.
Yeah.
But yeah, the banking system is a place where a lot of you pick up a bank and a lot of things crawl out.
Yes, like a...
But so I'd like to do more programs about this general issue of the offshore system.
It's really central to a systems understanding, and then we have to present an alternative that's going to be able to move the people in a movement sense.
The alternative is to end the secrecy. You don't need to have the secrecy. End the secrecy.
Well, that's what
put a real person's name on every account. Not have companies which are where the directors are all fake people, or where they're lawyers and accountants and not the real owners. End the secrecy, and that will be a very big step, because once it can be seen who owns these companies and who owns the money, it's much harder to hide from. What you have to do then is have all the banks share information with the home country of whoever has the deposit, which they're starting to do in Europe now. The European countries have to share the information of their account owners with the home country.
It may be a start.
Then you know what they have and what they're not paying their taxes on.
Yeah, transparency might be good, not only in this and other aspects. So Lucy, thanks. We've run out of time. I'm so glad to have you aboard Manhattan Network. Welcome very much. Thank you for coming in. Really appreciate it. And your site is rich as all can be, and one and all are recommended to go to it and see. It's called again?
TheComisarScoop.com.
ComisarScoop.com. She's got a record and she's got a resume. You get into her resume, it will knock your socks off how busy you've been. And thank you very much for coming in and for having such a very well-led life.
And people, I know you're going to put this on YouTube. But
yes, but it'll be up by tomorrow.
And also the Stieglitz video is on my site as well. So people can, people that want to look at the Stieglitz again, can look at that.
And there will be more.
And
there will be more
more
coming there, and there'll be more coming on public access. So thank you very much for viewing. Your pleasure to have the insights of one of our best investigative journalists, and it goes very deep and very wide, these still waters of Lucy Komisar. She's a very important person, and welcome very much to conversation. I thank you for coming in, and we invite you.